Warning. The following podcast features views and opinions that are likely to trigger the extreme fanboys and fangirls who disagree with them. Listener discretion is advised.
And we're back. Season 3 starts right here, right now, kicking it off with a movie that, well, I thought by the time I came back, it's March now. The last episode that came out was December. I thought this movie would be, it would die down a little bit. It is not. Today we're talking Star Wars, The Rise of Skywalker. And I know what you're thinking. My guest is Ken Knapsack. It's not, though. I know I said Ken would come back and talk about this, but I thought, I need someone who doesn't like this movie.
Ken's just gonna kiss its ass. Let's be honest.
And so I have with me Mr. Joe STARR, honest trailer writer, director of the Hamilton D&D Beyond videos.
That's right, which makes me more than qualified to pick apart the work of J.J. Abrams.
So usually on this show, what we do is we go back in time a little bit. We talk about how this film came to be. Look, if you want to, the Colin Trevorrow, however you say his name, that script is out there. The concept art is out there. You can go live that whole movie in your head if you'd like. I'm not going to talk about the behind the scenes on this. I want to go back in time to December here with you and me, because you saw this movie at a press screening a couple days before it opened, right? Mm-hmm. And I was very excited. I was going opening night, and
yeah, I think ours was less press and more just like early fan thing, but right. Yeah.
I remember specifically asking you, like, so what'd you think? Because out of everyone that's in this office, like, a lot of people here are cynical about Star Wars, wrongfully or rightfully so, however you want to see it. But you and I have kind of we've bonded over some of the deeper stuff in Star Wars, some of the lore, some of the sillier parts. So I was kind of expecting, you to come in and rant and rave. And I'll never forget, you had a big grin on your face and you said, I hated it. And I said, what do you mean? And you're like, well, put it this way. Someone texted me that they have an extra ticket for opening night, and I said no. And that's all. And you're like, but you're a beautiful boy, and you will love it. And we never talked about it.
Yeah. Not only I want to clarify that, because you said, the talk around this movie has not died down. It's March. Just to even underscore that, you and I have not spoken about this movie since you saw it.
We've it's like when your friend breaks up with a girl and you've called her a bitch or something, and you just maybe we just never bring it up and never happened. Yep. We've never talked about this movie because
we've danced around it.
We danced around it because, I mean, you're sweet. I think you did want me to go into it. You knew I was excited. You knew, you didn't want to damper it for me, and I appreciate that. I really do. And I think by the time we came back, it was kind of like, let's not start beef with each other, because I think there were a couple digs both ways.
We do dig, yeah. We have dug.
But it's so superficial, because I think this movie, a lot of our friends too, a lot of our friends that are huge Star Wars fans, it hit a nerve that even Last Jedi in some respects did not hit. Mm-hmm. So let's get just right into it. I think when you talk about The Rise of Skywalker, I think there's just a handful of key bullet points essentially that people walked away from. And I think we just jump right in. I think one of the biggest things that people are still really upset, and by the way, this is being recorded. The official novelization of the film has not actually been released, but there were some copies that got out for either review or just early release. And every headline on every stupid website is Star Wars confirms, as if Star Wars is a person, as if Dan Rather,
is Star Wars. Yeah. I'm Star Wars.
So, look, there are some things that we can talk about in context of the novel, some not. But let's talk about, one of the huge pieces of this is the Emperor and how Emperor Palpatine ties into this film. It's funny because I usually kind of know where you're coming from. I don't even know what your main beef is with this movie. So let's just talk about, what did you think of Palpatine and how he was in this film?
I think he ties into my general sort of sad about this film. And I call it my sad because, like, I didn't come out of it, like, yelling and screaming. Like,
right.
I know a lot of people came out of Last Jedi just like, I want to put this anger somewhere. And I've really liked the new trilogy so far. 2 out of 3 ain't bad. And so not liking this one was, like, the furthest thing from my mind, right?
Sure.
Even by the time Revenge of the Sith rolled around, I was still kind of like, maybe we course correct this.
Well, the first things that came out about this movie were, if you loved Force Awakens, you'll love this one. If you hated Last Jedi, you know, it was kind of like if you liked one but not two, that kind of comparison. But as people started to see it, I don't think that's true. I kind of feel like there is now a third option that has nothing to do with Force Awakens and Last Jedi with this.
Yeah. So with Palpatine, I think he ties into my overall, right? Which is that everything to me in this movie felt like a rushed half idea. And Palpatine was no exception. Like, I didn't have a problem necessarily with Palpatine coming back and being the big bad.
Right.
Because, you know, obviously he's the Phantom Menace, and sure, it makes sense that...
I mean, almost every expanded universe novel was built on the premise that,
of Palpatine being cloned, or
right.
yeah. And obviously, to me, like it's obvious that what's it called? It's not called The Final Solution. It is absolutely not called that. Although The Final Order was a play on that, I think. But you know, his the firestorming his last command or whatever when he died. That led to the First Order. You know what I'm talking about? Like firebombing everyone.
Yes. It's Operation Cinder. Right.
So to me, sure, like it makes sense that Palpatine's like posthumous Operation Cinder.
And I just want to pause for a second. Operation Cinder, because there's a good chance if you're listening to this, you're like, what? What is that?
Yeah.
That's actually from Star Wars Battlefront 2. It's in the novels. This was an idea in the expanded Star Wars universe, which is going to be a running theme for this whole movie. In the expanded lore of Star Wars, that, you know, Palpatine kind of knew that if anything were to happen,
he had a break glass.
He had a backup plan.
Yeah. And which is what led to the creation of the First Order. And it makes sense to me that horrible arch villain, Dr. Evil Palpatine, the point of that in case fire break glass is going to be for his benefit.
Right.
It's not just because he's like, oh, I want my vision to live on. It's going to be like, no, because I want to live on.
Right.
So the idea of it, I don't mind. And, you know, obviously, it's a complicated movie because it's not like JJ had, a second one to like start setting it up or whatever. But I still think there was an artful way to get there instead of what he did, I felt like he made an episode, we'll call it 1.5, that sort of got smashed. The first 30 minutes of this one feels like his second episode abridged.
Sure.
If that makes sense.
That does make sense. I hear that.
So, like, I don't mind. Like, I really don't mind the idea of Palpatine. Obviously, it's great having him back as a performer and stuff like that. It's just there are a lot of big ideas I don't mind about this movie at all, and I actually like quite a bit. It's just, it was weird to me that, like, at every turn, like, the execution of them, I was kind of going, what? Wow. Okay, that's what we're doing. It just always felt kind of just odd.
I think there was a lot initially, too, of people kind of like rolling their eyes when he's like, I created Snoke, and we see the Snoke clones bodies
in a jar. Weird.
You know, I'll tell you why that doesn't bother me. And I'll tell you why I actually kind of think it's cool.
Because a man should have a good Snoke jar.
Everyone should have a jar of Snoke. In case, you know, the big one's coming. It should be part of your earthquake preparedness kit. I like the idea, and this was something that I will totally give you is very much like, maybe this is just my headcanon, maybe this is whatever, but we get this idea that these people, these Sith cultists, these ones that are keeping them alive through cloning technology, which, by the way, everyone's saying, oh my gosh, it's a clone from the novelization pages. They made that pretty clear in the movie, I felt. Who it came from was kind of odd with the guy from Lost, like, you know, cloning. Who are you?
Yeah.
But the idea of cloning was there, and I like the idea that the power of Palpatine's dark side spirit is something that I don't think that they were equipped or knew how to contain. So this idea, and this is expanded upon in the novel, and you can take it or leave it. All the Star Wars novels of the movies have slight variations, but that they were kind of trying to find a body that could actually just hold his spirit in. And so the criticism I see a lot is like, well, then why did they have a body that looked just as old and decrepit as his one that he had, you know, before he was killed? Why wouldn't he want a new one? I kind of link it back to Revenge of the Sith, where I'm one of those people, and I don't know if this is right or wrong, I don't really care, but I don't think Palpatine is like the senator or the chancellor. I don't think that's his real form. I don't think a human body for too long can hold his real form. So who knows? Maybe a lot of those clones were, and just like
they burned out.
Yeah, they're just going to burn out from all the evil spiritness.
Yeah,
I don't know.
They got all Snoky.
None of that really bothered me. I do think like this movie just starts. You're just like, whoa! Like this felt like a 45-minute in reveal, and they lay it all out on the table in the first couple minutes.
It's weird too, because it's like the opening montage feels very sort of jarring to me, because montages don't feel very Star Wars.
Sure, I'll give you that.
So that was one of the first, hey, did you know? That I heard after I saw the movie, where someone was like, you know, that was Mustafar, right? And I was like, what? Like, you just, you glossed out, he's on
Darth Vader's home
there,
planet,
and you just like zip through it? What? That's so crazy. I like the idea of, I agree with the sort of the idea of like, old, you know, Senator Sheev was probably not his real form. And so there's like an essence that they're trying to clone up. I do think that, there was such an easier way to get there in the movie, instead of I have to trick you into coming here to want to kill me, but then when you kill me, my stuff will go into, you know, like
right. No,
he took so many, just like it was sprawling and condensed all at once. I don't know if that makes any sense at all.
Yeah,
me.
no.
Where it's like, we got a lot to get through, and it's a spider web of stuff. Like we're gonna family circus our way there. You know, like the old little comics where the kids going all over the backyard instead of just like A to B.
It's really interesting to me too that and I think there's more to it, and something that I really need to really like analyze and think about that I just, you know, full disclosure haven't. But there's something to Palpatine where it's always his thing is always like, strike me down so I can take you over. And I think there is something to like the body hopping. I think that's probably what he really meant to Luke in Return of the Jedi. Like, if you strike me down and my body dies, kind of like a reverse Obi-Wan, like I will be in you.
Yeah, that's interesting.
But I get what you're saying. Everything is condensed, but I'm not going to lie. One of my favorite lines, just because like I just get chills because I thought it was so cool, when he's like, I have been every voice you've ever heard inside your head.
Oh, yeah,
like,
yeah.
I thought that was really cool. Yeah. I get it. You know, Snoke was a little bit of I can see how it comes off as like, this is such a retcon, but honestly, like, I kind of feel like, well, Snoke had to come from somewhere, and this, if it was just a guy who came out of nowhere and that was it, like, I kind of think that's lame. I kind of like that Palpatine was behind it all.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. I think the most we got out of the expanded was that, like, when they got to the unknown regions, the remnants of the Empire, Snoke and a bunch of other guys were just kind of there,
right?
Like, they weren't initially a part of it. And they sort of like blended, and he like rose through the ranks very quickly or something like that.
Which makes sense if it's like a Palpatine kind of like driven thing, because you have to think like, I still need a presence out there, but I can't find a body yet.
Yeah.
And you know, the novelization too is saying that one of the clone bodies that they tried ended up being Rey's father, so it wasn't necessarily you know. Palpatine screws. It was like, no,
which
this body,
I almost preferred. Like,
well,
really
here's what
Palpatine.
I said, because though everyone was talking about, ooh, who would sleep with Palpatine? I was like, guys, think about how evil Sheev Palpatine is. Do you think that was a consensual good time, or do you think something horrific must have happened?
Also, well, you know, a lot of really ugly dudes get laid. in our world.
That's true. Yeah.
Like, a lot of really like popular.
Do you think there's like a Star Wars Stormy Daniels?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Oh, Sheev.
But one thing too, and I had to watch I've seen this movie 3 times in its entirety, but it took me until the 3rd time to kind of understand. At first I was like, wait a minute, why does he want Kylo to kill Rey? And then at the end he's like, oh, I'd never wanted to kill you all along. Mm-hmm. The movie does not do a good job of making clear that having Rey there at the end is his backup plan. He wants Kylo the whole time. And then when he tells General Pride, like, the Princess of Alderaan has ruined my plan, essentially, when she dies and turns him.
Kylo.
So his backup plan's Rey. But I will concede that I think the film muddies Palpatine's plan a little bit. And the dyad thing, too, it's like...
That's something in a script. When I was looking over, if I was like looking over a script, I'd be like, "What's this? This could probably go."
Well, it's so crazy to me because a lot of this is one of the things I shoot back with when people are like, "Oh, this movie just retcons everything in Last Jedi." I'm like, this movie doesn't work without Last Jedi because that connection. Now we know it's called a dyad. It's not Force Skype. But the way that Palpatine discovers it is, I will admit, very haphazard. Like, wait a second.
Oh,
a dyad in the Force? Never mind all of this.
Hey. Yeah.
So I'm not here on a hill saying that this is a perfect Star Wars movie. I kind of don't think any of them are perfect. They all have their like, well, that's dumb. But I will admit to that, like, Palpatine at the end, I do kind of wish he had one more scene or one more act with his restored body, besides being able to like tailor a new robe on the spot.
Oh, right. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's probably my thing in general. And I apologize for the weird vocal stuff. I had my flu like 2 weeks ago and the cough just like hasn't gone away. But I think in general, I just wanted this movie to breathe a lot more, like that intro is like a really good, or the opening like 30 minutes is a really good example where it's like, I'm killing these people on a planet that's apparently fucking Mustafar, which is cool. Like, I want to see it. And then I'm getting the holocron, the Sith, they call it a Wayfinder in the movie, which was weird. Because there had to be like a Disney lore guy in the room who's like, it's not what we call it, and that was a weird moment to me where I was like, what was that conversation like? Where they're like, oh, that's literally not what we call that thing, and JJ's like, it is now. It's a
like,
Wayfinder.
Too late.
So and like running there real quick, and here's this temple. Here's Palpatine. He like lifts his hands and like infinity ships come up. There's a version of that, all of that in my head that's very cool. Where it gets to breathe a little more, and maybe the crawl is just something along the lines of like Kylo Ren has navigated into like the unexplored reaches of space, or the unknown regions. Has pierced the unknown regions to explore an ancient Sith temple where he finds something he did not expect. And instead of like, oh, he's like force lifting all the stuff out of the ground, you do the reveal where like Kylo looks through the giant like arena sunroof and realizes like there's a fleet like straight up like in the sky, or whatever, stuff like that. Like, I think there was like a cool version of this movie that like breathes. And at that point, like, even if I don't like the choices that they're making necessarily, like at that point, at least like it's like a paced story that doesn't feel very like schizophrenic to me. The interesting thing about this movie, to me, like in terms of like reactions, is I was like I came out of it and I was like, oh man, I'm gonna have to text Ken and Billy after they see it and just check in, like,
yeah.
I hope because like I feel like if you've really been on board with Star Wars, like this one kind of really like punches you in the gut and kind of goes like, screw you for being on board. And I don't know why I went that way, and you guys were like, right on. Like I really, it's I don't know. It's interesting to me.
Well, that's
like,
what we're digging into right now. We're gonna find the cracks. So
we're gonna movie fight this.
Palpatine. It seems like we both kind of on the same page, where it's like, concept wise, no problem. Execution, I think maybe there's stuff with it that bothers me a little less than you, but ultimately I don't think that's a major sticking point. So let's move on to one that is most definitely the one that I literally saw some of our peers like cry over, to the point where it's like, it's just a movie, man. Rey from nowhere. Rey is definitely from somewhere now.
Oh yeah. This was a collect, and I feel I'm trying to be very leveled because I also just don't want to rant and shit on the movie at you.
No, but I mean, like, I want to hear your feelings. I'm not. I wanted to say this at the top, and let's say it now. The intentions of this conversation are not to walk away like, you know what, you were right.
I won
from either side.
I won.
It's literally just like we have not talked about this movie at all. So I truly don't know where you stand and what things bother you and what things you like. So Rey from Nowhere, I know, is one that, and you know, I'm willing to completely own up and open my mind to the fact that as a white privileged male, I maybe see things differently when it comes to this, because the people that I felt like were hit hardest were female, and they took the you know, the umbrage really to the line of Kylo saying, you have his power, Palpatine's power.
Oh yeah.
And I have my own thoughts about that, but first I kind of want to hear from you how you feel about the whole thing.
It was a couple of things, right? It was because I actually do really like Rey from Nowhere. Like it's such just a good pure chosen one, like new chosen one trope. You know, like the orphaned lad will rise up and draw the sword from the stone and blah 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 blah. So that I just thought what JJ set up in Force Awakens, you know, obviously he had this stuff on his mind in Force Awakens, but like, you know, just the idea of this girl that lives on a junk planet and scavenges and survives on her own and has like learned to fight and, you know, learned to survive is really cool to me. And that in itself gives her all of the moxie and strength I need to like know about her, right? And then Rian Johnson to me like didn't even turn a trope on its head, because I know everyone's like was like, oh, with Last Jedi he just keeps inverting everything. To me, I thought he was enhancing or almost like supporting what JJ set up, where it's like, no, it's just the scavenger girl in the dirt, and that's all she needs to be, and I agree with that. So for me, yeah, like I really liked the idea of Rey from Nowhere. So I was like, sorry, I almost just tripped and fell out of the chair. So in that moment, as soon as Palpatine was like, she's not who you think she is, I was like, oh no, what are they gonna do? I was just like, oh no. And then there's something like, in terms of, I don't know who would have been a good choice if someone was like, you're a Kenobi, or you're already a Skywalker, or you're a Chewbacca. Like, I don't.
If she was a Skywalker, I was like, both Leia, Han, and Luke should be locked away because they're all terrible parents.
Yes, absolutely. And also that would have been it would have been boring. But I also don't know, if you were someone who really just wanted her to be Rey from Nowhere, I don't know what the okay answer is. Because if it's not a core character and it's someone like Cody,
right,
or like a,
Mace Windu.
Yeah, or something like that, like someone who's too far from the core, or someone who's like only shown up on Rebels or something like that. Like I know there was someone who was like I remember, what's the kid from Rebels? Ezra. Someone was like, what if he's Ezra? And it's just like, if all of the sudden the 9th Star Wars movie is the first movie that acknowledges anything outside of the movies in an important way, I'll still be angry. Like, I don't know how, like if Ahsoka Tano just pops up out of nowhere as a main character in episode 9,
right,
my love for Ahsoka Tano will be overridden by how dumb and weird that is.
Right, sure.
So I don't know what the good choice is going to be. There's also just something about the amount of questions that pop up into your head are not like good, interesting questions. Like, in Force Awakens, it was interesting to be like, how does she fly the Falcon so well? How does she do this? How does she do that? And in this one, the questions that start popping up in your head as an audience member, because as a storyteller, you're supposed to make your audience ask questions. But the questions that were popping up were like, wait, Sheev F's? Like what? And then there's something clunky about the name Palpatine when you assign it to anything but Emperor Palpatine. That feels very weird.
Johnny Palpatine.
Yeah, Johnny Palpatine, baby. Yeah. Like what? And then around that there was like a hat on a hat on a hat with like how she got to Jakku, and there was a bounty hunter that went to get her, and they got her, and they all got on the ship, and then he killed the parents on the ship. Like it just was very like, you just dropped this big thing on me, and also there's just like a whole bunch of really like dense fine print around it, like very like kind of cobwebby.
I mean, not to echo completely the whole setup of 4, 5, and 6, but it does feel like this would be an end of episode 8 reveal rather than a middle of episode 9.
And and I know we sort of said we're not going to talk about like the context of the movies, but it's also hard for me as like also just someone who writes and likes writing and story structure and stuff like that. It was very frustrating to watch someone like JJ, who I do think is a very good storyteller. He can get a little obsessed with mystery boxes and blah, 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 but that's fine. But like, I am still of the camp that like Last Jedi is a good sequel to Force Awakens and does carry everything and leave it in an interesting way. I know a lot of folk like Red Letter Media is like, nothing happened. And it's like, no, the First Order took over the galaxy, right. And Kylo Ren is now the big bad and, this and that. I think that stuff's interesting. And sort of watching JJ aside from a couple of nods, like there's Rose over there, and stuff like that. And mentioning the battle.
Crate?
The Battle of Crate. Aside from that, just kind of being like, nah, I'm going to do my own thing, was like also sort of a frustrating thing to like sort of sit through, where it was like, come on, man, just like, if you wanted to do your, episode 8, you should have done your episode 8. Or really like fought for it or, whatever. But you didn't. So like, you're talented enough to take a look at what is episode 8 and like recraft all of your ideas for episode 9 in a way that flows better, because I think you could have. Sorry, Ray from Nowhere. Back to Ray from Nowhere. Yeah, it was like a weird combination of like, it's very jarring, the idea that like Palpatine has a lineage. It's like finding out that like Agent Smith has like a kid named Steve or something like that, and he's also a small boy that wears a suit and sunglasses and is like, Mr. Anderson. Feels weird.
I think it's more like, especially if we take the novel into consideration, it's more like Boba Fett having a kid, because this was a clone of Palpatine, so it's not like, they're all getting together for Life Day. Here's my take on the whole Ray from Nowhere thing, and why I kind of feel like they didn't have anywhere, like there was no other choice than this. Mm-hmm. For me, this is clearly the Skywalker Saga. I don't think they made any bones about it that this is the Skywalker Saga. Yeah. And to me, the Skywalker Saga involves two families. It involves, from the beginning, Palpatine's, which is just one guy. But essentially it's
which is one guy.
it's more like Godfather, in the sense of like, we are following the Skywalkers as we are the Corleone family. Mm-hmm. And I think the natural conclusion to 6 movies, 2 generations of Skywalkers being tortured by the Palpatine name has to come to a head.
Yeah, no, I agree.
For Rey from Nowhere, I think, it really bothers me when people say there's no unifying theme of the sequel trilogy. I handily disagree. I think that Rey has a clear path through each movie. In the first movie, I think she's very much trying to let go of her past because, she's waiting for her family. Her family's not coming. And by the end of the movie, she comes to the realization, it's not what's behind me, it's what's in front of me. The second movie is all about, I'm trying to find my place in all of this. Luke is pulling her one way, Kylo's pulling her the other way.
Yeah.
And I think the third movie is all about once you find out who you are, because I believe at the end of Last Jedi, she's kind of like, this is my family, right? Whatever it is. The third movie is kind of like, what if now, when you are comfortable with being Rey, because when she looks in that mirror on Octo, all she has is herself.
Yeah.
Looking inside yourself and realizing who you are comes from pure evil. And everything that you have comes from this source of just pain and torture and meanness and everything terrible. Does that define who you are? And I think that idea, coupled with what I think the sequel trilogy is all about, which is about legacy, it's about it's why this is not the further adventures of Luke, Han, and Leia. It's how did their legacies affect the galaxy to people moving forward?
Yeah.
How does the legacy of the evil of the Empire influence another generation of hate?
Yeah.
So I actually think it makes a lot of sense, and I think it's really poetic and ironic that the Palpatine line is killed by a Palpatine who, to put a cherry on top, takes the name of the family that he has tortured for generations.
Yeah.
I think that's really cool. And I totally hear when Kylo Ren says you have his power. I know that was such a, that hit such a nerve, and I understand. What I would say to that is, one, Kylo is the villain. He says he's trying to manipulate her. And two, I never saw it as like, the thing that makes Rey special is not the power that she has. The thing that made Luke special wasn't the power they had. The thing that made Anakin special wasn't the power they had. What made them special, what made them different, what made them matter was what they did with the powers that they had. It was choices. So I think the fact that even though her powers come from this bloodline of Palpatine, what makes Rey even more exemplary is that she chooses to use that power to turn against the one thing that she's been looking for this whole trilogy, which is a sense of family and belonging. And I know that they said that, originally the third act, they had filmed all these cameos of all the old Jedi, and they were going to be there with her. And I think as cool as that would have been to see Ghost Obi-Wan and Ghost Anakin and Ghost Yoda and all of them, that would have been wrong. Yeah. That would have been totally wrong, because I think I love that Rey finds within herself that's what she has to do. And so that's why Rey from Nowhere, I don't know where you go with Rey from Nowhere. I think if you were to take Rey from Nowhere at the end of episode 8, like, she doesn't really have anything to do in episode 9 in terms of like, what is her character growth from that point? She's already accepted that who she is herself. How do you challenge her? I don't know.
Yeah. And I don't know what my, cause I've read the Trevorrow script and looked, and there's cool stuff in it. Like, I
don't think it would have been like, oh my god, leaps and bounds better. It would have been very different.
Yeah, I don't know necessarily I haven't really thought a lot about what my 9 would be.
Right.
Because that was another weird sad thing is like, I just I had like no enthusiasm after I left that movie, so I was just like not even really like, oh, but what if they had like shifted this, because that's something I really like to do. It's just pick things apart.
Sure.
No, just like, because again, I'm just
you
like
do it for a living.
I do it for a living, baby. Just like as a story dork, I just like, even if I love something, I'm like, oh, but what if they had done this and like just merge these two, or whatever. Like, and I just didn't do that with this one. I kind of came out like, what? What was let's see here. What was another big thing?
Let's talk about while we're talking about Rey, and this is the one where we might have to go into witness protection after this. Reylo, at the end, they finally get their moment, their big smooch, their forced smooch, and look, a lot of people hated it. A lot of people will defend it to the death. I think for me, I'll say this about Reylo in general. It's so funny to me in this time of like not labeling, genders and sexualities and just being very, fluid and open with everything that we had to like binarily lock in Reylo as either platonic or romantic.
Oh man, don't even mess with like online shippers.
And if you're listening to this and you don't know what shipping is, it's people who fanatically, obsessively are fans of couplings of pop culture characters.
Yeah, it's something that you'll see and kind of go, oh, that's cute. And then when you dig a little bit, you're like, oh, it's not like, oh, that was a cute, fun idea somebody had once and then like moved on. Like, no.
It's
like,
obsessive.
It's really, really intense. It's, it's no different than the time you had people messaging you because they were like, you've never done half the things Tony Stark's done for us. Where it was like,
he's sure, yeah. There's a total disconnect from reality. But I do think, what is so interesting about their connection is, Palpatine very haphazardly, but he does say this is something that hasn't been seen in, generations, thousands of years, this connection between the two of them. And I don't know. I don't know if I even saw it as romantic. It was just like this bond between two people that is beyond any sort of label.
It's interesting, right? Because on one hand, the finger touch in Last Jedi is probably definitely top 3 horniest things that have ever happened in a Star Wars movie.
It's definitely the most intimate thing.
Yeah.
To me.
Now, does that automatically equal like, oh, well, then these two characters are in love and they're destined to be together? I don't know. But even without labeling the dyad and stuff like that, that's another one of those moments to me with Episode 9 where I was like, dude, you're doing too much. Like, just like kill your darlings a little bit and like tell a streamlined story, because to me, like, I already understand the connection between Rey and Kylo,
right,
and how intense it is and how important it is, regardless of whether it's romantic or not. Like, the stories have now shown me that. Even starting in Force Awakens, where he's like in her head and she just like gets right back into his and just shakes him the hell up, So it's like, yeah, you don't need to throw a Star Wars word at that. Like, I get it, I see it. But with the kiss and I don't know. It didn't bug me.
It didn't bug me. We
didn't get enough time with good Ben Solo.
I think it's interesting that once he turns Ben Solo, he does not really speak for the rest of the movie, which I kind of think is cool.
Yeah, that is fun, actually. Yeah,
I do think though, like, I get it that scene. Like if I'm being completely realist and pragmatic, that scene was definitely like I think people really want this. Let's put it in there.
Yeah. No, it does.
But for me also too, like, I kind of like if it is romantic, even on a slight, like, no one understands Rey this whole time. She makes a point of like, I love you guys, but you don't understand what I'm going through, who I am.
Yeah.
But he does. Yeah. And I think there's that connection. And
it's a great moment in Last Jedi where he's just like, everyone thinks you're garbage, but I don't.
Right.
Like,
and I think he really means it.
Yeah. I agree.
And I'm fine even if it was like if it was kind of like a tragic romantic moment. Like, I'm okay with that. I'm really okay with it, like, any which way you want to say it. If it was romantic, cool with me. Like, I think that I love the tragedy aspect of it. If it was like just this release of like platonic love. Maybe I've never like full blown Frenched a friend, but I've definitely given, a friend.
We know how this podcast isn't ending.
Sorry if I just dashed your dreams right then and there. But I mean, like, yeah, there's a lot to it, but I definitely think one way or another, that was a quote unquote fan servicey moment.
Yeah, it was. And like, I don't even necessarily mind the arc. Yeah, again, it's just like everything that's sort of like tied around and orbiting it, in the movie, like setting up the life force trades and stuff like that, the life force snowballing, because that stuff also then makes the kiss scene to me feel very like, because the script deems it necessary. You're dead. No, I'm dead. And like, but we established this thing earlier with the cave worm, and that's why we're kissing, because the script needs us to. Which frustrated me a little. I
want to talk about the healing power for a second, because this was one that really irked people, and this goes to like a bigger concept. And I want to throw this out to you because I've been thinking about this for a long time. Mm-hmm. It certainly was not a coincidence that the episode of The Mandalorian before this movie came out featured Baby Yoda force healing.
Yeah.
And I just find it really interesting. I think, look, I'm wearing a Mandalorian shirt as we're recording this. Mm-hmm. I really like this show a lot. I definitely think it was overboard. Like, this is the Star Wars I've waited my whole life for. That people were saying, like, this is all Star Wars is and should ever be. And I just find it interesting. Sometimes I call it the new car smell. I said when Christopher Nolan's Batmans came out, it couldn't be that those movies were great and such a great interpretation of Batman. It had to be Tim Burton's movies suck now because these exist.
Yeah.
And I'm just kind of wondering if Rise of Skywalker got a little bit of like, well, Mandalorian is so cool and different that screw Rise of Skywalker. I'm tired of seeing, it feels so small with just this group of people. It's like, well, yeah, because we're focused. It's like if you went to The Godfather and we focused on a completely different family.
Yeah, like 86 characters or something like that. Yeah.
So I'm wondering if like the new car smell of Mandalorian kind of...
I think... maybe a little. I think there's a little bit with Mandalorian too, of even people who were not on board with where Star Wars is right now.
Right.
Were enjoying Mandalorian, and so they were like, "Oh, I'm hoping." I'm hoping. Okay, maybe. And maybe a lot of that camp like didn't like the first two. So maybe they kind of went into episode 9 like, okay, one last shot. I'm liking this Mandalorian thing. Maybe we're going to turn it around. Nope, it's like kind of like the other two, and I don't like the other two. I don't like this.
But don't you think it's weird that Baby Yoda force heals and we're all posting memes, and Rey force heals and we're rolling our eyes? Oh, what can't you do with the force now,
All right. Well, no, I mean, I can't speak for everybody.
Sure.
But...
don't you dare say that Baby Yoda has had Jedi training, because I will walk out of the studio right
Baby
now.
Yoda.
He didn't even train.
Yeah, that stupid baby didn't even train. That is one part of The Mandalorian where I was like, because that definitely felt like, oh shit, they are gonna kill us.
Right.
They are gonna steamroll us if we just introduce this very clear, here's now a thing that I can do in a very clear, like, which will be very important to the third act, kind of way.
Right.
So the Baby Yoda was like a patch, and I mean, it didn't work for me. It's kind of like, okay.
I just was shocked when I finally did see Rise of Skywalker. I was like, oh, like this was planned. Like I'm with you. I think they went to like Favreau, was like, hey, do you mind if you could just put this
just
in?
Real quick?
Yeah.
How can Baby Yoda just like heal someone and then collapse? Please, because we are so dicked. And it sort of hits that force power argument, right? Because with Rise, or not Rise, with Last Jedi, I think there was still, there was a ton of like, oh, you just can't just invent force powers, which, yeah, you can. They're all invented. They're all invented. In that sense, all of them even are on the same silly playing field. But what I liked about what I liked about Force Skype and what I liked about Force Projection was that it wasn't just like, here's cool powers. They're going to help you understand something new about a character. So that's why I really liked those. And even stuff like, Palpatine, you didn't know anybody threw lightning until Palpatine did it. And it's like, yeah, but that's badass. Like, I'll give that a pass. Because lightning out of the tips of your fingers is pretty cool. Like, it's a real good oh shit moment. And like, it's pretty cool. Whereas the force healing almost felt like JJ knew where he was trying to get, and then it like he had his like last couple scenes written.
He had to walk it backwards.
And then he had to walk everything backwards to kind of get to it.
I will say, like, that's full disclosure, I saw this twice in the theater, and then I had a screener DVD, so I did watch it at home. And that was the part where she heals the sandworm, where I went and made a sandwich in the kitchen.
Okay.
I didn't pause. I was just like, I get it. I'll come back.
Yeah.
Let's move on for a second. You brought up something really quickly, and it's something that, I full-heartedly agree was like, you guys dropped the ball there, and that was with Rose. And I do think that was like we don't have anything to do with her, and we're certainly not going to go out of our way to find something for her to do. We can't drop her, but we don't have to feature her.
It felt like Dad got married to somebody new, and she came into the house and she's getting rid of Mom's stuff. Like, it felt like that in a lot of ways with his reactions to Last Jedi. Like, anything that was big to Last Jedi, new stepmom, put all of that in a box. It's in the attic now.
It's funny. I was really thinking about this really hard. I was trying to think, like, okay, what could they have done? If Rose had gone with that group, it would have been a lot of characters on that journey. I just don't know in the story that they had. Yeah. What role she could have had.
Yeah, in the story that they had, I don't know. I mean, the obvious answer to me is there were so many people on back at base now that suddenly had like speaking roles, and Lost guy, it's like, what?
Let's put a pin in Rose for half a second.
Like, Mary, what are you doing? Like, what is Meridoc? Is he Mary or Pippin?
He's Mary.
Like, what's Mary doing here?
That is easily the one thing when I was watching, I was like, nope. Like, who is this guy?
Who are you?
All of a sudden is like, Sith cloning, Sith experiments. I'm like, dude, are you Sith?
I don't think he knows about Sith cloning, Pip. Like, what?
It's like, bro,
get out of here.
You a Sith spy?
Get out of here.
How do you know?
Yeah, right. Like, how do you? Oh, ancient cloning. Like, shut up. Get out of here.
I will say, like, again, to your point of like everything is really like just escalated. The one scene that I feel like I really love that Oscar Isaac got a chance to shine in this movie more than the other two. I really feel like I feel like he had some really great moments in this, but the one moment I was like, oh, reshoot this scene where he's like, guys, somehow Palpatine's back. It's just like, I don't know. It felt like like the plumbing, like the air conditioner broke. It didn't feel like, oh my God, how did this happen? Everyone was just kind of like, oh no, that's the one. And then on top of that, you had like creepy little Mary who just happens to know everything.
Sith cloning. Yeah, it was. That moment's rough.
And I love this movie, and that's the one scene where I'm just like,
especially because it was unclear, because the crawl is like, the dead speak, a mysterious radio transmission from Palpatine has blah 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 blah, and then and has sent Kylo off on a rage to find the Emperor.
Right.
So we do that for like a half hour, and then we get to the Rebel base, and they're like, guys, yeah, somehow Palpatine's back, and everyone's like, oh, and it's like, but the dead already spoke. Like you should have had most of these initial shocks, and I think the point of it is supposed to be the spy is confirming and that they're on Exegol.
Right, but they could have been like, we've run, analysts have run it, like this is not a hoax, this is not a drill.
Yeah, or you don't start with the dead speak. And
I don't know. I know people hate that. That is my favorite Star Wars. I just think because Star Wars is supposed to be like pulpy, serialized adventures.
I'll give it that. It's a really good pulpy ass line. It's like chef kisses.
Revenge of the Sith, like war.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it was just jarring as an audience member to like get in and be like, man, let's see how they navigate Palpatine returning. And then the crawl's like, the dead speak, and you're like, oh, that's how we're doing it. Okay,
he just did.
Because because that's something I wish I had seen. Like. Maybe if the beginning's Kylo like has heard a rumor, he's been in his head or whatever, so he's going to get him, and you see that he like looks up and he sees the fleet and and then we get the transmission or something. The rebels are doing the rebel stuff, and someone's like, everybody should be listening to this, and the little hologram messenger pops up, or and you get to like see it. Oh, that would, because Oscar Isaac could have killed that, man.
Right.
Just could have like crushed just that helpless, like, I got to figure out how to put on a good face for this kind of like that. Oh man, that could have been good. But yeah, like, cloning Sith technology. And you're like, who's this guy? Who's this little narc? Like, you kids want to buy some drugs?
And then he does like nothing the rest of the he's literally just there.
Yeah.
Poor Dominic Monaghan. They're like, you can be in Star Wars, lifelong dream, but you're going to have to say the lines that literally no one else in this cast wants to say.
Yeah.
But
that's part of the bet. It wasn't like JJ lost a bet or something.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, going back now full circle to Rose, those moments on base, I get it, that's where she was stationed and everything. And, they said that it was tough because they only had so much Carrie Fisher footage. And again, like, when the situation and like, they were working with what they had. Like,
we can talk about that a little bit too.
It's really jarring. It's like, I'm glad that they kept it to a minimum, because every time she was on, I couldn't stop my brain from thinking like, how did they reverse engineer? Like, what? I wonder what she was originally saying that to.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
So when I first heard the news about like, we have all of this Carrie footage and these scenes that work, and we're going to use them. I was like, because I know that they shot like Han's funeral, I think.
Right.
And stuff like that for Force Awakens. So I was assuming they were talking about stuff like that. And I was kind of like, okay, that's cool. Like, yeah, pick up, like, use those scenes. I think that works great. And then in hindsight in the movie, and it's a ghoul, to quote Adam Driver in another movie. It's a ghoul. Or Knights of Ren. Ghouls! That was weird too. It feels weird to like discuss the use or the not use of Carrie Fisher stuff, but like, I wish, and like, obviously, like, no one's making practical or artistic choices in that sense. It's like this very real, do we want to lose Carrie from this thing that she's been carrying for years, right? That said, like, man, it doesn't work. To the point, like, you just kind of like sit back and it feels like kind of painful to watch that, like, this is like your last Carrie Fisher stuff is like dealing with an automated thing on a phone where you're like, operator.
Yeah.
And it's like, what's your name? And you're like, no, just operator. What's your name? Or whatever. Like, that's kind of how it felt.
Yeah.
And, it's like, as shitty as it is, like, and as like crushing as it is, narratively, you kind of look at everything, because Poe's arc doesn't really get rolling until after Leia dies, and it's like, it's all you, man. You got to figure it out. And that's like 2 hours in, I think.
It's at least like the end of the second act is when she passes.
So I really think that it's like, I mean, it sucks and it's sad. But I think it goes in the crawl where it's like, General Organa like has passed away, or whatever, like however you smooth out the writing to do it, but the spirit of her resistance lives on, or whatever,
right. What's interesting is that with Star Wars you cannot get away from, and we talked about this in our Matrix episode actually, which was, a movie should stand on its own. That being said, there is like outside canon and lore, and the Resistance Reborn book has this really interesting. They don't harp on it too much, but they do go.
This is the one that's after Jedi.
This is the one it was like the prequel novel to Rise of Skywalker.
Okay, got it.
And they do talk about like using the Force to bring her back into the ship from outer space. The quote unquote Mary Poppins scene took a lot out of her, and she never fully recovered.
Yeah.
So you're supposed to go into Rise of Skywalker knowing that she's on the brink of death as it is. But it's weird because you're right. Just solely based on the footage they had, she just all of a sudden,
any of that,
just all of a sudden, she's just like, it's like, I don't feel good, and she's gone.
Yeah. It's so weird, and it's in a trilogy and in a movie that's very much about legacy and bloodline. I think that the meta choice is to just give Billy Lord more to do. Just give Connix like a chance to step up. If Poe's got to step up and like lead the whole thing, where does she move up in the org chart or whatever? Because that's, actually that's also a Star Wars thing that I've always loved that was kind of missing from this one for me is marking time and character growth with ranks. Because you never really, I'm literally just thinking of this right now. But like, it's, this kid Luke, and then in the next movie, no one even ever makes a big deal about it, or you never like see him get the thing, but everyone's like, Commander Skywalker. And by the end, they're like, General Skywalker. And you're like, it's pretty cool. Yeah. Or maybe not General Skywalker, but General Solo.
I mean, General Solo is huge because he never officially joins the rebellion until after he's thawed out from Jabba's palace.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just think stuff like, and like it informs really well, right? Where it's like, the rebellion's cool, and now they have the they've got Akbar's fleet and all that stuff. They're pretty strong, but like they're still so screwed in the personnel and leadership division that like, the thought out thief, He did us a solid once, let's hope this guy gets it. And Han even or Harrison Ford even kind of plays it like that, where it's like, I remember one time my dad got made president of the Rotary Club. I was like in middle school, and I was like, congratulations. And my dad was just like, yeah, because no other asshole would take it. And anytime they're like, General, huh? I'm reminded of my dad getting the Rotary Club, because that's kind of the way Harrison Ford plays it, where he's like, yeah, what an honor, because no one else was stupid enough to do this.
I agree with you in the sense that, they did what they could with Carrie. Yeah. If you had to put her in there, which I think the outcry would have been more if she had no presence. Yeah. I really do.
It's weird, right? Because it's like, let's say like I was making the movie, and that's the initial plan, where we're going to take all this footage and we're going to build scenes around it. And Disney's already announced it. And people are like, oh, thank God. We don't have to say goodbye yet or whatever. I was one of those people. I was not ready. Like, I was sobbing when she was floating in space in Last Jedi, because I was like, well, that's it.
Yeah.
And then Carrie Fisher's little ice hands make a fist. And like, I was bawling. I was like, yeah, you don't give up yet, Carrie Fisher. Like, I was crying.
I thought, you know what I thought was so strange? I was like, oh, okay, this is how they're going to write her out.
No.
And then they do that close to her face. I'm like, we're kind of lingering on this awkwardly too long. Like,
Yeah,
this
right.
is feeling gratuitous if she's dead.
I was like, she's gonna make it. She's gonna make it. Like, I was crying. I was actually crying in the theater. And then when I came out, I think Dan was the first person to call it Mary Poppins, and I was like, "You shut your mouth." So going back to this weird hypothetical where I got to make episode 9, like, you know, you've lined it up and you're like, this is what we're gonna do. It's been announced. What do you do then when, like, you look at that footage and you're like, not even like, oh, this doesn't work for a movie, but you're kind of like, I don't like this as, like, our goodbye to Carrie Fisher. It feels so weird and robotic.
Yeah.
And she was not a weird and robotic person.
Right.
She would, you know, like, because you watch those scenes and you're like, that's not how she would have interacted with Rey, you know? She wouldn't have given sort of like vague wisdoms or something like that. She would have rolled her eyes and sassed someone and like hit someone with a rock or something. But like, what do you do with that? Like, that's one place where I'm like, even though my criticism is like they shouldn't have put Carrie in it. Like, I don't judge them for keeping it.
It's an impossible
situation. How do you navigate that?
Right.
You don't. You just don't.
So let's.
Anyways, there should have been more Rose.
Yeah, there should have been more. That was the long way of saying if they wanted to keep her with Leia, unfortunately, they just couldn't. Mm-hmm. Let's move on to, we've talked a lot about the issues that a lot of people had, but I just really kind of want to talk about some of the things that I really loved and kind of gut check and see where you land on it. We talked about Rey from Nowhere and that really resonating with a lot of people. But I think the one thing, I think taking that spirit and where it worked for me so much to the point where I think this might actually be my new all-time favorite Star Wars line is where did they get an army? It's like, it's just people. I loved that idea at the end with all those ships, and it's like, it's not an army. This is not, the First Order. This is not the rebellion. This is not, one side versus the other. Like, this is people coming together to do what's right. And I think that's like the core of what Star Wars is. Talk about Rey from nowhere. All these ships are from nowhere. They're just people, know? I really love that moment.
Yeah. Maybe that would have been my B story for this movie. Was like the actual gathering and of all of that from after what Luke inspired everyone with his last act at Crate. Because again, it was like I like this idea. It's the execution where I'm like, when they're like, Lando, round everybody up. And you're kind of like, well, wait, how'd Lando just do that in like 5 minutes when like did.
Crate happened like 2 years ago.
Yeah. Like, so this sort of been like kind of like mobilizing at this point.
So again, that's where like, and I fault nobody for this criticism, but that's where that Resistance Reborn comes in. You find out that a lot of the leaders that Leia's like, why didn't they show up? They're being rounded up by the First Order and put into work camps.
The sequel trilogy in general did a bad idea of establishing the bigger picture of what's going on in the galaxy.
I 100% agree with you.
Because at this point, and you get some moments where in this one where you're like, where, they do like the, they're on the planet, sneaking around trying to find Babu Frick, and like, it's an occupied planet, like a freshly occupied planet, which feels, you're kind of like, wait, now what's going on exactly? Because they're not in charge yet. With the supplemental material, we know that like, well, yeah, they're in the midst of their blitzkrieg of the galaxy, and they're very close to winning. But yeah, I think, in general, like the sequels did a very bad job sort of like really giving you like the context of like what's going on and when and what it means to like the larger bit of the galaxy. But I am going to read that book. I am going to read Resistance Reborn. Because, it's like I like the... it's got a very like Dunkirk vibe, right? Where it's like all the civilian ships are going to start like pulling everybody out and like protecting people and stuff like that, which is really, really cool.
And they just like the Star Wars main theme just ramps up, and it's just like such a rousing moment. And I get it. Like at the, if the movie lost you by that point, there's nothing you can do. But if it hasn't lost you, like that to me is where it's like where it really picks up. A couple other quick things. We'll just kind of breeze through the last couple things here. Jana.
Oh yeah.
Here's where I think I don't dislike the character of Jana. Here's where I think like, oh man, such an easy fix for me could have really like made this such a great thing for Finn. You know, they bond because they were both stormtroopers that defected. Mm-hmm. But imagine if Jana was like, yeah, we heard about the stormtrooper that defected and became like a hero within the Resistance. Mm-hmm. Now you've given Finn a reason for existing, is he's inspired other people like him.
I think they wrote it off as like a Force thing.
Right. Yeah. It was,
which I didn't like.
Or just more just like it was a feeling of doing, which by the way, you don't need the Force to tell you that killing innocent like women and children is like
bad.
a bad. You don't need midi-chlorians to tell you don't murder innocent people.
Yeah, exactly.
But I do feel like, you know, people were upset with Finn's kind of whole like, I need to tell you something because he's Force sensitive also, that we find out during the movie. And one way or another, it didn't really bother me either way. I kind of, in my heart of hearts, I kind of feel like they were like, this is the end of the Skywalker saga, but we're leaving some breadcrumbs just in case we ever can come back to this.
Yeah.
You know? So Jana was one where I was like, and the really like talk about shoehorned. It's almost worse that they didn't shoehorn Lando's her dad into it, because then it just reads like really odd at the end.
Yeah.
It's just like, huh?
What?
Yeah.
Yeah. Just staring at each other and you're like, this doesn't.
Yeah.
Come on.
Let's find out, baby.
Yeah.
like, no, thank you.
I'm good.
Hux, I liked that Hux, you know, he got bullied so bad by Kylo Ren in that last movie that, yeah, it makes sense to me that Hux is just such a fragile crybaby that he doesn't even care about the First Order. He just cares that Kylo Ren looks like a douchebag.
Yeah, I because I know a lot of people were like, but he, you know, like he's not a true believer or whatever, and or in the Resistance or whatever, or his like turn was enough. And I think that's a perfect arc for him, where it's like he's going to turn the First Order, not because he believes in the rebellion or in Leia or Hope or anything like that. He just hates Kylo Ren. That was one of my favorite parts of the movie. I didn't like how just like sort of useless it ends up, you know, like Pride, like just kind of like capping him and then we would like move on. I think he needed that, that like Grima Wormtongue moment or something where he just finally like makes his move and like, you know, it doesn't have to succeed or anything, but, you know, gets his big moment to try to kill somebody, Pride or Kylo or, you know, whoever, or just even just a futilely try to kill a Knight of Ren or something and then just gets like murked. But I did love that in the movie. Like his arc is just so gross and slimy.
Right.
And
Yeah.
Yeah.
Knights of Ren. I know people were irritated that they kind of just don't do anything. Guess what? How many Star Wars movies have amazing costumes? Characters that end up doing Phasma, Boba Fett.
Oh yeah,
Emperor's Royal Guards.
Yeah,
like,
I don't like any of that. I don't like it, the fact that that's a thing.
But people are pinning it like, oh, of course the night. It's like, dude, every Star Wars movie has awesome characters that are all over the packages of every toy and do absolutely dick.
Oh yeah, no, I know. Yeah, I don't know if my crawl fix would have been like Kylo Ren.
You're just like ... Also, the Knights of Ren are really cool.
Yeah, or if it's just like Kylo Ren along with his Knights of Ren have taken control of the First Order or something, just so you get an idea of like where they fit.
Sure. Yeah.
You know why they're here.
I hear you. Yeah.
Or so. Yeah. I don't know how I necessarily would have used them. But yeah, I agree. They look really cool, and then like they look like they're about to go whip up on the Battle of Helm's Deep or something like that.
And then nothing happens.
Yeah, and then like nothing happens.
Which is
a frustrating Star Wars tradition. You're absolutely
it's
right.
not this movie's. It's not the only movie that does that.
Also, no Rule of Three with Phasma made me sad. I really thought we were going to get a third Phasma.
Said if she comes back, like now it's going to be like pathetically lame. Like. It stretched the credibility a little bit, but I was like, okay, now you're going to turn into Will Ferrell from Austin Powers, you know?
I'm very You're badly burned.
Moving along, just a couple more things here as we kind of wrap it up. I really do, we talked about it for half a second, but I really did love all the voices of the Jedi and hearing, Kanan and Ahsoka and all of these, like, I don't know, just for once, even if it was fleeting, it felt like everything that I had invested so much of my life into, like, mattered.
Just like lined up a little bit. For a
right.
second.
Yeah. And I just thought that was really cool. And I thought that was such a great moment. I do think, though, I really want to know who wrote it first. You have to think that Avengers and Star Wars are filming around the same time.
Oh, on your left? Yeah.
Oh, actually, I was going to say, that's interesting. I was going to say I am inevitable, I am Iron Man. I am all the Sith, I'm all the Jedi.
Yeah.
Like, I wonder who did it first.
Because the moment where I did that was like Lando being like, we're here, or whatever. And all the ships on your left for Poe around the Falcon. Yeah, I'm the Sith and I'm all the Jedi. Yeah, I don't know.
Probably Avengers, even though I know that the I Am Iron Man thing was a last-minute addition because he originally said nothing.
Yeah.
But I do think every time I hear that, I do think like, oh man, if you guys hadn't come out in the exact same year with the exact same ending,
Yeah, it wouldn't have. Yeah, I don't know if it's just like that's what happens when you got a bunch of people percolating ideas in the House of the Mouse,
right.
or whatever.
Other things, I loved Leia's lightsaber. I thought that was really cool. I really loved everything that was on the other moon of Endor, or was that the actual planet of Endor? Everything I thought was cool. I thought the Death Star wreckage, I get it. It makes no sense. We watched it vaporize into space dust, and then
I don't mind Death Star wreckage. I think it's a cool idea.
I think Death Star wreckage.
I don't like what they did with it, but I think the idea of it,
in the middle of the ocean, was just awesome.
Yeah,
like
it's a
that
very cool visual.
The return of Han Solo, that scene is just so beautiful. I think both of like Harrison Ford rarely shows up to play, and I feel like he showed up.
That's a moment that, look, I haven't read this new book and I haven't seen ScreenRant.com. By the way, everyone just starts scooping Screen Rant. Like, other copies of that book exist. Right. Just read ahead of them. And start scooping them. Like, they're clearly getting great traffic by just like going a page at a time, right. And being like, "Oh, this page is this."
Star Wars confirms.
Just start 10 pages ahead of them, and do your own Star Wars confirms content. That is a moment that I desperately don't want anyone to touch and explain and be like, "Oh, well, there's a different thing that's not quite a Jedi ghost." Blah 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 blah. It doesn't, like, that's a moment where I'm like, that doesn't need any kind of explanation or anything. Like, it doesn't matter. I don't need a lore assist.
Right. I think that it's the film, I felt like, did a great job of it's a memory. It's an altered kind of memory. You think back to situations you were in, like, man, I wish I could have done this. I wish I could, and that's what that moment is.
I'm just waiting for like the Screen Rant tweet that's like, Star Wars confirms that when a dyad remembers something hard enough. Like, I'm just waiting for it.
I just loved that moment, that, again, the hand touch, but this time, like, because then it ties back Force Awakens, like, that moment now means something. It's, that's the touch to the cheek that saved the galaxy. I really loved John Williams' score. Again, like, I feel like he always, when does he turn in something terrible? Yeah. Babu Frick was fun. Zori Bliss is another character where it's like, cool costume. I don't really know who you are, but I like your helmet. That's neat.
That's cool. It is a very cool, like, Buck Rogers throwback that I liked.
The fake outs of the Chewbacca death was kind of, it's whatever. It didn't bother me. I guess I was into the story at that point. So, I'm rapidly in my brain trying to think of every tweet that someone has thrown at me in the last 4 months of why I'm an idiot for saying that I love this movie. But ultimately, for me, what this comes down to, there are things in this movie I love. There are things in this movie I've said in the last hour that I wish, could have changed a little bit. But what it all comes down to me, the moment where I was like, I love this movie and this means something to me, is when Poe, Rey, and Finn hug at the end, and there's a shot of John Boyega's face holding back tears. And I really felt like I had been on a ride with them, a bumpy ride.
Yeah.
But I really felt like I felt that love. I felt that connection. It felt real to me. It didn't feel like these characters. It just kind of felt like a goodbye to kind of everything. And that's when I knew that this movie worked for me.
Yeah. No, I think that ending is good. I was so glad they didn't try to figure out what their new Yub Nub was going to be.
No, and you know what's interesting about that too? I was watching it one more time. I was like, it doesn't have the sense of finality that Return of the Jedi has. It doesn't feel like the First Order's gone forever. It just feels like they won a big one today, and then it's back at it tomorrow. And I'm okay with that because it doesn't have the fireworks and all that.
I mean, they do They do a little bit. They do the Independence Day, they're going down all over the world.
Right, but it doesn't. I don't know. For me, it just felt more like we took a big step today, and this is because I think that's the other thing about legacy. It's learning from history. I don't think this is going to go away. There's always going to be tyranny that they're going to have to keep in check.
God, now that you say that, you know what I would have loved is after that hug, if Poe is okay, let's go finish the job. And just all these people pick themselves back up and get back in those ships and everything starts taking off.
We got a lot of work to do. Yeah.
That would have been really cool. But yeah, no, I agree. That sort of we want a big one today. Yeah, I like that vibe. I agree with that.
Again, it felt really subtle, but I do feel like they were just just in case, Disney Plus, a movie 10 years from now.
Oh, you're going to get it. Yeah.
So yeah, look, Rise of Skywalker, every single Star Wars movie, maybe aside from A New Hope for me, there's silly things, there are dumb things, there are eye-rolly things. I do think as a culture and a fandom, lowercase fandom, we have deified Star Wars in a way. I think we have made it so it is more than it actually is. And I think in that sense, it's Star Wars should be XYZ. And it's well, Star Wars is, you can love it, but you must also accept that it is kind of silly and stupid. And a lot of things don't make sense because it's for 12-year-olds.
Well, the important thing, Billy, is that we're still friends after this conversation.
I really thought this conversation was going to be a lot more back and forth. It seems like there's more common ground when you talk about it.
Yeah. I mean, look, I can sit and go scene by scene with this movie and just be yeah, but come on, man. But I also hate that about I hate that. It's why I don't like movie fights that much unless they're stupid.
Yeah.
Unless we're going to argue best movie donut. Okay, yeah, sure. I'll roll up my sleeves and scream at you about donuts.
Right. Power Rangers, Krispy Kreme.
Yeah. I mean, obviously. But I think it just what's the use of yucking my buddy's yum?
Right.
You really like this movie. I don't see how you did. Still in so many moments where I'm that didn't bother you, but it also ultimately it doesn't matter because we also get to do it all over again with the High Republic. And all this stuff the ride keeps going and there's tons of Star Wars stuff that why sit and fixate on Rise of Skywalker when you and me can shoot the shit about like Star Wars Rebels or all the stuff we liked in Mandalorian or whatever, or like the Kieran Gillen run on the Star Wars comics, this and that. Like there's so much like stuff to like, and I think that's sort of how I've like focused in,
Yeah, because you've always been the type that's like, well, I didn't like this thing, but that ship was really cool, or that helmet was really cool. Yeah. I think even this movie, even if you're like narratively it's not what you wanted at all, there's still really cool sequences.
Yeah,
fighting lightsabers in the middle of an ocean is cool.
Yeah, it's like I I don't like that Poe Dameron was suddenly a drug dealer that was having sex with Zori Bliss. And I don't like that I watched Zori Bliss's planet explode from a Star Destroyer that had a big dong on it. And then somehow she's just alive again. But you know what? She looked like a cool futuristic lady Rocketeer. And I liked that. I liked that a lot.
That was a very Rocketeer looking helmet.
And then at the end, Poe Dameron went, "Do you want to have sex?" And she went, "No."
That was hilarious.
And I loved it. Yeah, I like that.
I was not surprised at all that Poe Dameron was a former drug dealer. It makes sense. That was Rise of Skywalker. My only regret is that we waited this long to actually talk about this movie as friends. But if we can do it, you can do it. You can also subscribe, like all that fun stuff. Season 3 kicking off. What a great episode to kick it off with. Coming up next week, 12 is the new 11. We're talking Ocean's 12 with Carlos from Hey Do You Remember podcast. Looking forward to that. And the week after that, oh, that's right, Mr. Ken Knapsack, who was not here for this episode, is going to join me, but for Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. That is all coming. Season 3, thank you guys so much. Check out Reboot It, now only on YouTube, because you have to see it to believe it. And I will see you guys next week.